our journey, we're beginning to realize that we are literally swimming in a sea of energy. And if we learn to fine-tune our own frequency, perhaps we can affect our health. Perhaps there is a source of free energy all around us. Nikola Tesla had a dream that we could have some very clean energy source. John Hutchison, my guest on Journey, has been exploring that dream and expanding it all of his lifetime on his journey. John, I'm so fortunate to have a chance to have a chat with you.
Great.
And to see some of your work.
Pleasure being here.
We want to let people know that you came down from Vancouver, Canada, so you are here to just share with us what you've been doing. I know that Nikola Tesla has long been a hero of yours, as you said, and in a very early age you started recreating some of his experiments.
That's right, especially in the anti-gravitational fields and manipulation of matter through his type of frequencies and Tesla waves and that.
The famous Tesla coils, which are very large apparatus, you actually were able to build yourself, and I want to go to some photos of the lab that you created and show some of the apparatus there. I'll let you explain it.
Okay, for sure. That sounds like fun. And here we have a small Tesla coil and a disruptive discharge transformer that was used by Tesla. I reproduced these, and he was happy to, in the early days, present it to the electrical engineers at that time period. And here we have U.S. scientists looking at my apparatus in operation. This would be Los Alamos and U.S. Army Intelligence. And here we have more samples set up for tests and various geometries of the samples put there on milk crates to show that there's no heat. And here we have again Los Alamos staff and technicians looking at the effects that are happening there, and yours truly tuning the control.
Well, for 20 years or so you've been experimenting, and I think how many years did you actually have that particular facility, that huge lab, operational?
Basically, in operation, it grew from about 1969 on to 79, and by that time it was quite massive. And the effects started happening in 1979 and discovered by the scientific community in about 1980.
Yes, you've been courted by NASA, DOD, Defense Logistics Agency, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, all your life, basically, to explore what you're doing. And they tagged it the Hutchison Effect.
That's right. Yeah.
What exactly would you consider that is?
That's the effect itself is tagged to me because with this type of Tesla machines and that, there's the levitations, the unexplained separation of metals, the influence on nuclear material, also the transmutation of atomic elements and that.
Well, we talked in our earlier show, which if folks didn't get to see, the applications are such that you could assist in removing radioactive materials, and of course levitating in anti-gravity, where things were flying off. We're looking at a propulsion system there.
Advanced propulsion system that could be applicable to NASA's program of 19 members, recently formed at NASA HQ in Washington.
And they actually are to study and explore the possibilities of warp drive, right?
That's right, yes, faster than light travel.
Great. Well, currently you are now not in a big lab facility because most of that equipment went with the Canadian government.
That's
but
right, yeah.
in your own apartment, which we're going to show later, you have accumulated some more equipment that you hope later to put in another lab. But what are you doing now as far as practical application of working with energy sources?
Well, talking of free energy, there's the consensus of physicists around the world, from Buchartheim in Germany to Hal Pitoff and others, Dr. Rauscher, many others that I can name over and over again, that there is this zero-point energy. And Richard P. Feynman, who now has unfortunately passed away, mentions that in a light bulb size area of time and space right here, there's enough energy to boil off all the oceans of the earth. And it's labeled zero-point energy. Now, my idea was, how do you capture something like this? And the only thing I can understand is basically by trying using something similar to the Casimir effect, where you have two metal plates that come together and create heat and energy, according to Hal Puthoff. And working with crystalline structures, I found that I've captured some small amounts of energy working in plates of crystalline material. They're pressed together and excited by high voltage. And here we have a small unit that's actually got a voltmeter on there.
Crystalline structure in crystals and minerals. We use quartz crystals in watches and in computers and all sorts of applications, don't we?
Quartz itself was used in radio as for fine frequencies because it vibrates. You have to excite it for it to vibrate, and it's called the piezoelectric effect. But you want to tune your interest to what they call self-reactive materials. One prime example of that is barium titanate. That is self-reactive material and has ferromagnetic properties and piezoelectric properties. And
so we're discovering even the minerals and the rocks around us are vibrating. They're like alive, aren't they?
Yeah, everything's alive. Everything is in motion. Townsend Brown of Stanford University was able to draw voltage from rocks, ordinary rocks.
Okay. Well, we've heard of people putting maybe copper wiring in the ground and generating some electricity. Is that possible too?
Oh, that's entirely possible. Tesla had various patents out on that, and that's basically now standard physics where you can do that. You can have a 50-foot antenna onto a tree and get voltage off of that, and you can even rectify it and create a little power source and fill a capacitor.
There you go. In researching for this show, I spoke with a friend of mine who works for the U.S. Patent Office, and he indicated that there had been over the years a lot of patent applications that use the terminology free energy or zero-point energy, and now for the first time one has actually been granted that does use that terminology. So apparently it's becoming more an accepted scientific look at it. Let's go explore this.
Well, there's a paradigm shift that my colleagues, Brian O'Leary and others, say there's a huge paradigm shift in energy and in alternative medicine.
In our acceptance of that finally, or our allowing the possibility that something like that can have an effect on us.
Exactly.
I think too, when you mentioned health applications.
Health applications by utilization of electromagnetics through computer controls can actually be used to rearrange the genetic code. Applications like that are already going on in the United States at MDI and other locations in California.
Well, does that indicate that our bodies have a certain electrical magnetic charge to them?
Oh yeah, even in our brain there's what they call weak nucleic acids, which are magnetic and have magnetic properties.
So applying a certain frequency may then interact with our own frequency and maybe help balance something out that's like gone askew.
Yeah, that's true. That either can balance what is out askew, rearrange the electrobiochemistry of a person, or if it's used in dangerous ways, can actually cause people to be agitated, nervous, and have mental breakdowns.
Now they're determining two certain frequencies do that. They are agitating, even though we can't even hear them or sense that they're occurring. They're there nonetheless. They're invisible.
Invisible basically from ELF into microwaves. And a prime example of a microwave antenna is a pine needle. The simple pine needle resonates to the stuff coming from space, and this is not healthy for our trees, and not healthy for us. Certain
that would
parts of us
bombard those trees and start shaking the pine needles off?
Oh, it interferes with the electrobiochemistry of the trees.
Trees' growth itself?
And their communications between the trees. Their communications through pheromones and that. Within our cells, we have areas that are agitated by microwave energy. Prime example is all the cell phone use of people getting tumors in the brain and that. But still,
perhaps it's not really good for our bodies to be interacting with machines too much, huh?
No, unless you're in a healthy range of frequencies.
And there is a healthy range of frequencies, and so that might imply assisting us if we're in a disease state, which is probably an unhealthy range of frequency.
Or you could actually tune on a signal generator a very fine frequency for a particular virus, as done by Dr. Royal Rife in the 1930s.
Isn't it amazing that this work has been going on for so many years and it continues to pop up, but hopefully it's popping up now and it's going to hang around and finally be usable.
It seems so more and more in this day and age that the recognition of these force fields and electromagnetics and electrostatics and magnetic fields are indeed applicable to curing many health problems.
Well, we want to talk about what you've been kind of playing with, and we're going to show some footage of your apartment. Explain just briefly how you made this.
Basically,
what's in it?
This is a casting of just common minerals in a liquid form, and I heat this up to incredible heat and put it in a mold, and I make sure there's no water or moisture in these, and I feel that it's capturing a tiny, insignificant amount of the 0 point energy.
I think we can show a clip from your kitchen where you literally were sort of what I call shake and baking these at home.
Yes, that's true. That's one way of doing it.
Because you are applying some heat to allow them to.
You have to. Yeah, and then I apply a high voltage charge to them.
Now here's your apparatus at home.
And this is using larger units that are now mostly sold off in Japan. We're getting better voltage ratios. And I believe we're powering a small motor with this, which would be in the range of about 100 to 200 milliamperes. And as you can see, I'm running my little experiments there.
Now you're showing that in those tubes, that's where you have your ingredients, your minerals, and they will form a solid state, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is once they form a solid state, you actually would have what we considered like a battery.
Yeah. Yeah, a 0 point energy battery.
And when we're talking about 0 point energy, then we're saying that the excitement of these certain minerals in combination and the process of which you've developed and been experimenting with is absorbing energy around it or attracting energy from around it?
It basically allows for the cascade action of 0 point energy, which is on the extremely high end of the electromagnetic spectrum, way above light, to come down into these lattices on a subatomic level. And then it's the electrons then accumulate toward the anode and cathode on these pieces here, and also on those ones that are cast in containers.
Now you've got one here that is about the size of a battery, and the idea here is that once you create this and it's excited, it will then maintain its energy supply, right?
That's right.
It will become a power source then.
It becomes a self-reactive power source.
And go, and go, and go.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Watch out, rabbit.
Well, that's what everybody tells me. They want to see the rabbit sort of go a little faster and longer.
Well, are there any toxic things in what you've made?
No, these are common minerals. That,
are there toxic ingredients in our existing batteries?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay, so when we throw those away as frequently as we do, we're not doing a service to the zones in which we're trying to trash those, are we?
No, you're throwing acid out and nickel and cadmium and mercury and a host of other toxic heavy elements.
I think the idea is that to move into a cleaner way of doing things, hopefully, is coming to the forefront now as we're seeing the amount of pollution we're dealing with. We're seeing the amount of trash we're having to deal with. And so hopefully we'll see that this is not a threat to batteries, but the next generation of a better, enhanced, expanded battery, safer, cleaner.
And that would probably last logically for centuries.
Wow. Okay.
That's a fair estimate. I mean, I have here a mechanical contrivance, which is Again, mechanical machines tend to break down, let's say, in 5 years, something like that. It's a little generator. And
Well, what, just the sheer wear and tear and torque on mechanical parts?
yeah, that's impractical in my opinion, to have anything with moving parts. So I like the solid block materials that that don't wear down, and they're environmentally strong. You can coat them with plastic or other materials that makes them tough and rigid. You can cast them even in concrete if you want to.
What then is your next step with what you're calling your crystal converters?
Well, right now, some scientists in Japan, in the United States, checking them out for their power
Is
factors.
that him beeping? He's alive, right?
Well, that means that the meter wants to turn himself off after a period of time. It's got a built-in memory there. See, he's gone off now.
Okay. Well, this is, and we've had this hooked up the whole time, because it's been registering, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been registering power, and these things, these ones here, can put out up to 3 volts, depending on the mixture. Now, I've gone through many different mixtures, and
it's a real process, then.
it's a real delicate process, and the very first ones I made were the best. And
so now you got to get back to the
yeah,
creating those. Huh?
Actually, they were even simpler. And this anode here, or cathode, here I'm just using a common screw, but it should be improved with niobium metal on a piece of stainless steel. That would collect the electrons a lot faster, instead of just a bolt or a piece of metal thrown in there. A certain atomic elements like to draw the electrons to them.
And so in effect that, now it is absorbing and holding, and you even indicated too that some of your earlier ones, which you said were really good, or older now, what, a couple years old, that almost
a year and a half.
are getting more powerful?
Yeah. The more you abuse them and the more you test them, the tougher they get, because the crystalline matrix builds and memorizes this.
Wow.
And then
that is very alive kind of.
Even with the up and down movement of the moon, let's say there's gravimetric tension, and all that shifting back and forth also causes them to be enhanced.
So we're looking at what could potentially be a good next generation of a very, very everlasting battery, non-toxic to the environment, and can be in all sorts of shapes and forms, right?
That's right. It can be cast in any shape or any size, any form. And the most powerful form would be casting of a honeycomb shape, meaning that you'd have many little parts in there that are separated from one another that can capture energy and amplify it to the next cell. But it can be cast in any shape also.
Well, this is our future we're looking at. I want to take us on a little tour of your apartment and show some of the equipment that you've been accumulating.
Okay.
Keeping in mind, we know that you eventually want to put this back in another lab and get back to the Tesla experiments that you've been doing.
This is okay now. Of course, my apartment is.
And here you are.
Well, now I'm explaining some of the receivers I use for monitoring signals out in the environment.
I think we're not in general aware of how much signals are all around us. As you're pointing out with all this equipment, what are the range of signals out there that we're constantly surrounded by?
Right down to deep direct current, right up to cosmic rays. Right up to the cosmic ray. So I have here a fair collection of equipment that can monitor each section of this as
so is there a lot of activity going on?
Yeah.
So when you flip those switches on and
Yeah.
you're just seeing all sorts of waves, right?
All the way up, continuous from 0 up to way into the gigahertz, right up into the cosmic rays. And then when I need getting that high in cosmic radiation, then I have to resort to Geiger counters to collect that kind of information, and with X-rays, then again other special equipments. And there's one piece there that goes up to 44 gigahertz from 10 megacycles. And that covers that section of the electromagnetic spectrum. And I'm going down here to show a
well, we have
fantastic
devices
recording device, 42 channel input on that, where I can pour in the
well, so you can capture the data there.
oh yeah, I have all
right,
the equipment to capture the data and store it. XY plotters and chart recorders. And I'm walking through here looking at some RF generation equipment, which I like to experiment with, producing effects with radio frequencies. And I'm now pointing to some more RF generation equipment, U.S. Army equipment from Ohio. And it puts out at least a couple of 100 watts, and there's another receiver, Army receiver. As we walk around here,
I don't think we realize that, you know, the waves that are surrounding us, they're all frequencies. You know, we're walking through it and just existing in it all the time. We've got a lot of satellites out there too that are beaming waves at us all the time, aren't they?
Not only satellites, but you got satellites, you got thunderstorms, you got meteorites that hit in there, and the ham radio operators can pick up even the signature of meteorites hitting into the in the air there. And there's the HARP project up in Alaska, which now has added more RF to the threshold of.
Now, what in our atmosphere, some of these waves, do they bounce around then? Because I know there's something called the Van Allen belt that surrounds the planet, and there's electromagnetic energy out there, isn't there? It's like there's a crust of it or something. Yeah,
very, very highly charged particles. And luckily, our Earth keeps that at bay with our ionosphere layers, which are many of them, and also our geomagnetic field, and keeps all this sort of out in the Van Allen belts, so it doesn't come in and burn us down with cosmic rays and extra UV radiation and that. So you're dealing in pollution, you're weakening the ionosphere, and
which is our protection, isn't it?
It's our protection.
Basically, our atmosphere is there for a reason.
But each one is dependent on the other. The geomagnetic field is dependent on the ionosphere. When you get the northern lights, that's because of a solar storm coming in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There's electricity going on all around us.
Well, that's everything's made up of energy, basically, when it comes down to it.
Now, the light spectrum that we can see is one aspect. Most of this is totally invisible to us. We don't really sense it or feel it unless you become acutely sensitive, maybe. Some people do feel it, don't they? When they're around large equipment or microwave or satellite dishes.
That's true. That's that's pretty well known now for some time. And you can even go off as far as to say that there's a lot of paranormal research going on in this area, because at 21 and 24 centimeters there's a lot of work being done in telekinetics and ESP of Dr. Henry Strapp, let's say, McDonnell Douglas Aerospace. They actually can measure these RF frequencies in that.
In our own brain. Goes through quite a frequency range itself as it progresses through alpha, beta, delta, theta states, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Changes its own vibratory rate or frequency.
Yeah, and our whole body actually is like a battery too. I'm trying to remember the exact voltage. I think it's roughly 10 volts. 10 volts. I was reading it actually in a ham radio publication. And
well, there's something to having a really charged personality, then, isn't there? Right.
Well, you don't want to start zapping sparks off all over the place and electrocuting people,
but we certainly have some potential in our own bodies, don't we?
Exactly. And these electrobiochemical systems can be actually programmed by benevolent energies to recreate and redevelop new enzyme processes and amino acid combinations. Eventually there'll be a time when perhaps, I'm just speculating now, but even aging can be stopped, even reversed.
Well, there has been some evidence that even previous to us, other civilizations that maybe had less toxins to deal with, less pollution, were living a lot longer than we are.
Yeah.
So maybe we should learn something about what we've been doing.
Yeah, well, it's like the bacteriums that have adapted to antibiotics.
Right.
Will mankind be able to do that himself? Adapt to to all this? Maybe everything's coming too fast, and maybe what will happen is, unfortunately, the trees might die on us, or we get more diseases and more powerful bacterium or viruses.
We don't want to see that. We'd like to help educate the public in the fact that energy is a source of potential good, as well as can be destructive. And there's the balance there. I think that we'd love to, find harmony in the way that we can have a battery that's not toxic, that lasts, for a very, very long time, or forever. A lot longer than maybe even we will. And it's good to apply ourselves to some of this technology.
That's true, and it's like in the old days when hydrogen bombs were made, they were taking the secrets of nature there and from the sun, let's say, and creating things that shouldn't be on Earth and should be left to the sun instead of. Now we have all this toxic nuclear waste to deal with. And
as we have to come to our close, I want to thank you for sharing with us your current work and encourage the fact that we hope it will, come to the forefront and help, because just the other things that you're doing and applying this to health and educating us to the fact that, there's an energy out there we should be tapping into more. We're going to show one of your experiments from the Hutchison Effect, with the Tesla coils. I think it's a 60-pound cannonball as we close, lifting and kind of doing its little thing to show what you did before. But this is what you're doing now. It's aimed towards the future for a better, cleaner, safer, freer energy.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's the modern age.